So welcome to part 2 of me trying to figure out what's next. I got my Zzounds system, my 2 guitars, my multi-effects processor, paid off, you play as you pay as you play, whatever it's called, and kind of itching for something new. And we were talking about, on the last video we were talking about my Fostex VF160 multi-track recorder, which is quite old right now, and it really doesn't have a modern day interface. In fact, a lot of computers, PCs, Macs don't even have CD-ROMs anymore. They might have a memory card reader or something like that, or a USB or Lightning adapter that plugs into the side to give it some kind of micro SD or USB connection. But there's another issue. I've read in a few, I don't know if it's Reddit or various musicians forums, that a lot of people have problems when they mix down their tracks on their Fostex VF160, probably other ones. The mix down, the stereo mix does not sound like it sounds when they are just playing it back in multi-track mode. And it's like, yeah, you get a sound that sounds pretty good, and then you compile it, you mix it down into that stereo track, and it doesn't sound as good at all, and levels sound slightly different, and just something sounds different in it. And that's why a lot of people say they like to sort of just record, with a multi-track, or use, the new ones as interfaces to interface to their computer so that they can do Cakewalk or some other Audacity or whatever and do their editing there. In my last video, I also talked about the Zoom Live Track L20 and the L12, but there's also the L20R portable digital mixer. It's a rack mount system, but ear controls are missing, or at least most ear controls are now on an iPad. So you got to have an iPad to I guess with Bluetooth it controls all the controls that the other standalone, the normal L20 and L12 and all have on board. And going back to my older Fostex hard disk recorder with the CD burner on it, you have to have, it's a 16-track multi-track recorder. You cannot record 16 tracks at one time without another interface, like the Behringer 8200, which is the cheapest, like $179. It has an ADAT interface that'll interface with the multi-track, so then you can record 16 tracks at once. Now technically I guess it's still a 16-track recorder because you have 16 volume controls and I guess effects and compression and stuff on each one, but you would have to, without that system, record up to 8 tracks, move those tracks to track 9 through 16 I guess, and then you got your 8 tracks. I guess you can see, it's kind of complicated to do that, but if you have the interface, you can do all the recording at once. And you got 8 connections on here. Only 2 of them are XLR, and only 2 are high Z, so for direct bass guitar, whatever. So the rest of them are going to be line level, I guess. And then if that's not enough, you still have to have, if you want to have a modern connection, you still have to have like a Scarlett interface, for ADAT to USB. I don't know anybody that uses Firewire anymore, but you could possibly get a Firewire interface if your computer has Firewire. But USB 3 and all, they're big things now. So Firewire, kind of old. Even the ADAT interface, I guess, is kind of antiquated. I don't know. But, and then it does have, but SPDIF, optical connections for some other sound cards and devices, but I think it only supports 2 channels, so a stereo, 2 tracks to send it to a PC or whatever. So you need something that's ADAT compatible to transfer all your tracks to the computer. If you don't have, if you're a CD-ROM or whatever. This is actually the one I have. That's a slightly different model that I was showing you guys. I'm just looking on Google Images and stuff and various websites, but this is the specific one I have here. As you can see, it has the CD burner there. Has, I guess that's the SCSI port there. MIDI here. Let's see what else. That's as far as it'll zoom. 3-prong power connection, just like a PC, and stereo left and right, RCA outs, I believe. So you got all of your little volume controls for each track, and then you got your master volume there. And one thing I'm just now noticing, it's been a while since I had mine out, but the new Zoom, the Zoom L12s and all, will have I think a compressor thing on every, a manual compressor adjustment knob, which is kind of nice, I think. And then back to that Zoom Live Track L12, the standalone one. Not a I did say that the rack mount system for this is $100 if we would even use one, but let's just look over here. So yeah, you got a compressor for every input here, which is very, very nice. Or would I consider the L20R portable digital mixer for $100, $200 cheaper, and then have to have the iPad control it. And I do have an iPad, which is nice, I guess, but I'm not sure I want to have to rely on an iPad. Now, what I've kind of found recently is these Friedman overdrive pedals. They have like a Friedman BEOD overdrive, and then they have the deluxe dual overdrive pedal. And when I check them out on YouTube, they sound pretty amazing. And they say they really will drive a tube amplifier really well. And guess what? I in the last year or so, I did buy that Fender tube amp, and it's really loud, and I haven't really got a lot of chance to play it. And I kind of like the idea of having individual pedals versus multi-effects. Multi-effects saves you a lot of money, but I like to have that individual control as well, especially for a pedal or pedals that I would use all the time. I want to be able to touch those knobs on that specific distortion or reverb or whatever it is, and just have that control. And even just if I want to take a pedal and put it directly in a multi-track or whatever, and being that I do have Shure SM57 mics and tube condenser and stuff, I'd also potentially put it in that tube amp and mic it. Another mic, the Shure SM57 condenser mic is super popular, for acoustic recording and stuff. And I think even like drum overheads, and a lot of people will say, yeah, you have to have it. This is something you have to have. And every studio, every hobbyist musician, whatever, needs one or a pair of these guys. So for the longest time, they've sort of called my name off and on. And then you have the Avantone CV12, the Taylor Swift microphone, as people call it sometimes, because I think she recorded her album 1989. And I'm not super familiar with Taylor Swift's songs. I know she is really, really popular, though. Big hit with the girls, the teenagers and stuff, I think. And you know, I've heard a lot of samples of this recording vocals and acoustics. I think pianos, probably drums and everything, but from what I hear, of course, I haven't put my headphones on the iPhone or anything and listened to these videos on YouTube, but from just hearing it on the phone speaker, on the laptop speaker and stuff, it does pretty amazing at capturing acoustic guitars. And then there is the Avantone CV12BLA, which is, I guess, where they took that microphone and they modified the circuitry and changed the power supply and a few other things, and supposedly made it, you know, a little bit or a lot better. And I haven't found a whole lot of A/B comparisons, you know, with acoustic guitars and stuff like that. There's somebody like just talking between the normal CV12 and the CV12BLA. There's a little bit of differences. He says, you know, if you got a grungier voice, maybe the original CV12, you know, would work better for you. But in, I guess, a lot of cases, this other one is an upgrade that people like. Now, I did do some Reddit and just searches on the BLA, and it seems like some people are having problems with them getting low levels after they warm up, and possible capacitor issues and stuff. So I'm not sure the quality of the mods. Is it being done by, you know, a small group, you know, doing these modifications? Is it being sent to, you know, a warehouse in China doing them? I don't know. I'm sure it's easy to find out. Well, a quick Google search says the Avantone company is a USA based company, but there says some indication that the microphones themselves are manufactured in China. The company's based in the USA, and it appears to involve a combination of US design and possibly Chinese manufacturing, along with design inspiration from Europe. Going back to the Zoom multi-track, the L20, it also has a remote input, so you can buy this Bluetooth adapter, and it gives you the, I guess, the same controls as that L20R, you know, and you can control it both on board and with your iPad. Now, Zoom seems to be, I think, a Japanese company, but they also manufacture in China. Now, going back to pedals, there have been other overdrive and distortion pedals that I've been keeping my eye on, or off and on, and including like the Eddie Van Halen EVH 5150 overdrive pedal, and you know, they sound pretty darn awesome, you know, when you listen to them on YouTube. I'm sure you could probably go to Guitar Center and stuff and probably try some of these guys out and see how well they sound. But I do have one, if not multiple, EVH amp simulators or whatever in my Line 6 multi-effects processor, and it's probably not too much different. Anyway, that's it. Alright, is there going to be a part 3 where I'm re-examining old stuff from the first 2 videos? Or is that going to be enough to make an ultimate decision? Or are there going to be some new things that I find that pique my interest? I think that's it. If we make a decision, obviously we'll make a video about it. Take care, guys.